Hey everyone, I'm really excited for you to hear today's stories, especially the first one that involves a grandma and a cornfield. Be sure to listen to the end and let me know what you think. But first, did you know that a full 77% of you do not subscribe to my channel? How about sharing some love and clicking that subscribe button so we can meet again? Same place, same time, tomorrow. Great. Now let's get into the stories. This story takes place in Huntsville, Alabama in the summer of 2017. I was outside on a sunny afternoon in the heart of Alabama. It had to have been June of 2017. Well, at least I know it was 2017 because it was the 25-year anniversary of my mom dying. I had grown up in that house, and I lived there with my own husband until he passed away a few years earlier. Anyway, that day I remember I was outside thinking of my mom and tending to her roses, relaxing in the sun, when all of a sudden something large and dark rushed past me from the front of the house and back into the cornfield. Now, corn hides a lot from view. We kids used to hide in the rows when we were little. Bobby Jo, my younger sister, even got lost once, and all we could do was hear her crying, but it took a half hour or so to actually find her. I've never seen a kid so scared in my life. Me, I was smart. I stayed out of the middle of the field. I only went a few rows in so I could always find my way out. However, this day was different. Whatever ran past me ran right into the cornfield. It went in fast, and it was big, but it moved in a way that seemed light and agile. I squinted in order to see the thing better, and I crouched down to see into the field further, down low where the corn isn't as thick. I don't know why I did it. Squinting never improves anyone's vision anyway. I started to wonder if I needed new glasses because I figured I should have been able to see this thing in more detail. And now I was super curious. I got up and started walking toward the corn. The neighborhood kids always liked to come on the property to play games. I figured it was just one of them up to no good again. Maybe one of them hiding from their friends. I yelled over towards the figure in the corn, waving my hand in the direction to get its attention, telling it, "Be careful, don't get lost in there." But there was no response. I thought that was strange because normally the kids know when they've done wrong and they come out and apologize for trespassing. You see, at this point in my life, I was the grandma to all of them in our town. But this time there was no answer, and the air seemed really still, and that caused a little chill to start up my spine. I would later blame that on the breeze, but to be honest, I don't believe there was one that day. I swallowed tightly, wondering why the kid wasn't answering like they normally do. So I walked closer to the cornfield and soon noticed down on the ground some kind of an animal print. It looked like maybe some kind of wolf. In all my life, I had never seen a wolf print before, and I don't even remember actually seeing a wolf since they are rascals and they are really good at hiding. But my dad used to tell me all kinds of stories about wolves, and none of those stories were good. But I bravely walked further into the corn and towards where the dark shape had gone. And then soon, a few feet in, I could start to make out some dark fur. And I stopped to think about how this kid must be hotter than heck wearing whatever he was wearing. So I called out for him to listen to me and come out real nice. And that's when it happened. Before I could say another word, the thing took a step and a dark, hairy foot came out into the light. It looked like the leg of a wolf, but it was standing upright, meaning just one back leg was in view. I thought I must be seeing things. I rubbed my eyes, and that's when the creature shifted its weight and leaned towards me. Now I could see the wolf body ended at the waist, and it became sort of like a man with light-colored skin. On the neck was the head of a huge dog, though, or at least that's what the thing looked like to the best of my description abilities. Some kind of shepherd, I think, like all brown and black. The thing that made the creature so disturbing to me weren't the sharp teeth, those long, pointed teeth. It was actually the eyes. They were yellow. Now I'm talking bright, really bright like the sun. They were the kind of eyes that struck your soul when you looked at them, and we were now both standing there, staring at each other. I couldn't help but think how its yellow eyes would match the corn when it was ripe. But at the same time, I was frozen in fear. Half of me wanted to run, the other half wanted to stay and just figure it all out. Figure out what it was. The half-man, half-dog, or whatever it was, growled lightly as it sniffed the air in my direction. I swear by that point the color had completely drained from my face. There's no way that no one ever heard of an old woman being as frightened as I was in that moment. Somehow, though, I also had the thought right then that my church friends were going to love my story. I mean, we never get anything strange in our town. So then the creature leaned closer to me. I caught the whiff of a familiar smell, like salty corn. And it wasn't coming from my crops either. This was the distinctive scent to German shepherds and beagles. The whole thing just wasn't right. Not right at all. I started to question my sanity. Maybe I was imagining the whole thing. Or maybe it was a trick of one of the kids and they were playing with me. They were always up to no good, fooling around. I folded my arms over my chest, feeling some of the fear drain from my body. I was feeling a little like my old self again. That was, until I felt the drool splatter from its mouth. And then everything suddenly became very, very real. I never did see a creature quite as tall as that thing ever before. The thing must have stood nearly 8 feet tall, must have weighed a good, 300 pounds. It was massive. I knew I stood no chance of defending myself. Doubt there was much I could do but just scream. If I was lucky my heart would actually attack me, I would just die right there. But I guess God had other plans for me. The neighborhood kids happened to run into my yard right at that moment, and the creature swung its head in their direction. They weren't close to us yet, and probably didn't even know that I was a few rows into the cornfield. The beast-like creature now turned completely in their direction. Its left ear twitched, and then it turned again, and it dashed back into the cornfield for cover. I could hear it running on 2 feet across the rows, and then I didn't hear it anymore, and it was just gone. I cocked my head and I tried, but I couldn't hear anything at all now. The kids came through the yard further and over to the field where I had entered it, and this time I was grateful for them to be looking for me. In the end, I think it seems like the creature didn't want to hurt anybody, because I think it easily could have. I kept my eyes peeled after that day any time I was ever outside, but never did I see that thing since. I reckon it was just passing through the area. I hope. Made me wonder if there were more like it out in the world. I guess there would have to be, because you can't just have one of some living creature. If there's one, there had to have been more in order for it to even exist. But I was just glad I didn't have to see any more of them. That could have been the complete death of me. It was a cold winter day in 1979, and I was driving my patrol car on a local state highway here in Wisconsin. It was around noon at this point, and I had been out there since 6 in the morning. I was tired and hungry, but still on duty for another hour or so. The road I was driving on is a 2-lane highway with no shoulder or guardrail. There are houses scattered along the road for about 3 miles, but then it opens up to farmland for another 8 miles before you get to town. So as I was driving along, I saw this old guy walking down the middle of the road, heading towards me. He looked disheveled and kept his eyes down and on the road. As I rolled up to him slowly, he never even lifted his head. So I pulled over and asked him if he needed a ride anywhere, if he was okay. He looked shaken, but told me no, that he was just out for a walk and that he lived down the road and was just getting some exercise. I said okay, but asked him to please get out of the middle of the road, stay off to the side, and stay safe. He shook his head a bit in agreement without looking up and moved off the side, but just kept going. So I sat there a while and continued watching him walk. He never looked back. Eventually, still watching him in my rearview mirror, I pulled away and continued on slowly. I was still focused on him when about a half a mile up the road, in the area that he had been coming from, I approached something laying on the side of the road, an animal, something that looked like it had been hit by a car. I instantly thought how strange it was that the old guy didn't mention anything to me about it, but then again, he barely did say anything to me. This animal, it was about 4 feet from the edge of the road, so I figured somebody must have hit it pretty hard to knock it that far off and into the ditch. Maybe the old man didn't see it, but that would be very unlikely. I slowed down to look out the window at the thing lying there dead and eventually stopped my vehicle and got out. I put my hand on my gun and slowly walked towards it, with my senses alerted just in case it was still alive. I mean, I know from experience that a deer that seems dead can still kick a mean punch if you get too close. So as I approached, suddenly this thing quickly reacted to my presence. It stood up on 2 legs, and it started running towards the strand of trees to the right. It ran fast, and it ran on its hind legs with its arms swinging in front of it. I'm sure I had a crazy look on my face as I watched it because my head was swimming trying to comprehend. The creature was about 7 feet tall and covered in long brown hair. I kept blinking to try to be sure that I really was seeing what I was seeing. I froze for a moment, trying to process it all, and then I drew my gun and started running after it. I don't know why I did that, but I did. I guess my training kicked in or something. It eventually crossed the entire field and ran into the trees, which is when I lost sight of it. My heart was racing as I stood there at the edge of the tree line, listening for any sounds. But I heard nothing except the wind blowing across the fields. After a minute or two, I walked slowly back to my patrol car while looking back at the trees the entire time, still trying to compute it all. When I reached my vehicle, I hopped in and drove away very quickly towards town, hoping that someone else would have seen it or reported it. The entire way back to town, I kept thinking about the old guy, too, the guy in the road. I wonder if he saw it and kept his mouth shut, but why would he do that? His presence didn't make any sense in any of this, but seeing him was just as strange as seeing the creature, so in my mind, they're very connected. But then on the other hand, I started to wonder if I even really saw him. I just couldn't figure out what part he played in all of it. Ultimately, nothing was ever reported in the news. No reports were called in to the station. No other officers mentioned anything at all similar being seen by them. And eventually it all died down, and I started thinking of it less and less. But for years afterwards, especially when I would be out patrolling at night that road, I would sometimes feel like I could see a pair of yellow eyes looking back at me from the woods. They seemed to glow in the dark, and it always gave me a pit in my stomach. I often wondered if I was just imagining those eyes, like something still lingering from PTSD or something. And since this was way back in the 70s, there was no way to easily look things up or find information back then. And I wasn't about to talk to many people directly about it, so I just kept it all inside. However, in recent years, I've been able to poke around on the internet and search. My final conclusion after reading a ton of info is that I think it was a dogman. Yes, I honestly think that the thing I saw all those years ago was probably one. Truthfully, I still get chills thinking about it, and I'm glad now that nothing bad happened to me that day, especially with how stupid I was to follow after it. And I still wonder what happened to the old man in the road, and what part, if any, he played in all of it. Truly, even though I think I know what happened that day, the inability to know 100% what really happened is the hardest thing of all for me. I mean, I just don't have any closure, but writing this is helping, and for that, I'm really appreciative. Thank you, Lilith. Thank you so much.